Coming up on Arirang News, U.S. stocks rise to all-time highs on optimism for a trade deal with China. President Trump saying Phase 1 could be signed soon. Also signs the Fed will cut rates again this week. Executives with the South Korean ride-sharing service Tada are indicted for operating without a license. Taxi drivers are among those who say such services are competing unfairly. And K-pop sensations BTS are performing tonight in Seoul as they wrap a hugely successful world tour. So successful, in fact, that it's believed to have given a boost to the South Korean economy. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. Last week, North Korea reminded the U.S. that it's got a year-end deadline on the nuclear talks. And now a close aide to Kim Jong-un is the latest in the North to demand a security guarantee for the talks to get moving again. Oh Jung-hee reports.
North Korea has once again called on the U.S. to offer a security guarantee. Choi Ryong-hae, the head of the North's Parliament's Executive Council, the Supreme People's Assembly Presidium, attended the Non-Aligned Movement Summit in Azerbaijan last week. Saying that the Korean Peninsula could return to a moment of crisis at any time, Choi blamed the U.S. for keeping its hostile policies towards the North. He added the North can only discuss denuclearization with the U.S. when Washington takes some practical steps to get rid of policies that threaten the North's security. Choi also emphasized that the UN is legitimizing U.S. authoritarianism and is practicing injustice by sanctioning victims. Regarding inter-Korean relations, he said the North cannot improve its ties with Seoul because South Korea is, quote, depending on foreign forces. The North is sending a series of messages calling for U.S. action every 2 or 3 days. The message from Choi comes only a couple of days after North Korea's Kim Yong-chol, Pyongyang's former nuclear envoy, urged swift action from the U.S. Kim Gae-kwan, the advisor to Pyongyang's foreign ministry, has also demanded Washington take action by the end of this year. Experts say this trend reflects the North's discontent over how the U.S. has not changed its stance since the Hanoi summit and shows the North's impatience as the deadline is set, the year's end draws near. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea and the United States seem to have narrowed their differences on how to share the cost of stationing U.S. troops on the peninsula next year. An official familiar with last week's talks on the matter in Honolulu told reporters Monday that the meeting helped the two sides agree on some aspects of a deal. The official said further that in these talks, a win-win deal is possible. This year's so-called Special Measures Agreement, which expires in December, required South Korea to pay almost $900 million US. Next year, President Trump reportedly wants billions more. A film festival in Japan has decided not to show a documentary about Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women and girls, the so-called comfort women. The film, now pulled from the festival, is called Shusenjo, the main battleground of the comfort women issue, directed by Japanese-American director Miki Tezaki. It was to be screened at the Kawasuki Shinyuri Film Festival outside Tokyo. But the organizers said they had to cancel it, citing supposed safety and management risks because some people interviewed in the film had sued to stop the screening. That decision has been met with protests. A film company, Wakamatsu Productions, said it was withdrawing 2 of its movies from the festival, accusing the organizers of murdering freedom of expression. Now, the latest on the radioactive waste that's gone missing in Japan, washed away by the typhoon that hit earlier this month. The authorities have reportedly confirmed that 66 bags of contaminated grass, wood, and soil were lost, an increase from the number estimated before. But the Japanese government doesn't seem too concerned. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
The historic rainfall from Typhoon Hagibis reportedly swept away numerous bags that contained contaminated waste from the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. Japan's Kyodo News Agency reported Monday that 66 bags were washed away from the containment site. Tokyo's Environment Ministry confirmed the loss from 4 sites in Fukushima Prefecture, including Niomatsu and Tamura. Although it explained that some bags have been recovered, nearly 24 appear to have opened up, spilling waste matter into the river. These bags, which weigh up to a ton each, contain radioactively contaminated grass, wood, and soil. Thousands of these bags were left out in the open at temporary storage sites without even a sheet placed over them for protection from the wind or rain. While the Japanese government insists the concentration of radioactive materials is relatively low and has little impact on the environment, South Korea is calling for swift measures.
We plan to continue dialogue with Japan throughout November by setting up a team that focuses solely on tackling the aftermath of the Fukushima nuclear disaster.
In 2015, 240 sacks of contamination waste were also carried away from the temporary storage sites due to heavy rainfall. Kim Yo-san, Arirang News.
South Korea's main opposition, Liberty Korea Party, has slammed the government's policies on the economy, diplomacy, and reform, claiming that under the Moon Jae-in administration, the country has lost 2.5 years. In a policy speech in Parliament Tuesday, the LKP's floor leader, Na Kyung-won, brought up the slowdown in economic growth, which she said is about to fall below 2%. She once again criticized the government's income-led growth policy, as well as the falling employment rate and the widening income gap. The floor leader also hit out at the government's policies on North Korea, claiming that Pyongyang's nuclear and missile capabilities have advanced even more, and that it has been test-firing missiles to threaten Seoul. She stressed that it's time to rebuild ties with Washington and revive the Allies' military exercises to protect South Korea's national security. National Assembly Speaker Moon Hee-sang will refer 4 key reform bills placed on a fast track last year to a plenary session set for December 3rd. The Speaker's spokesperson, Han Min-soo, made the announcement on Tuesday, with the respective committees having finished their mandatory 180-day review of the bills. The main opposition has been strongly against the measures, which include setting up an independent unit to probe corruption among high-ranking officials, and an electoral reform bill that would introduce a mixed-member proportional representation system. Han told reporters that if rival parties reach an agreement before December 3rd, the Speaker would be willing to bring the bills to a vote sooner. The leader of ISIS, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who blew himself up on Sunday during a U.S. raid, has been buried at sea. Pentagon officials said on Monday that his remains were buried within 24 hours of his death, in accordance with Islamic tradition and religious rites. It's not been revealed, however, where they were buried. U.S. defense officials indicated that they followed the same steps taken with the body of Osama bin Laden after he was killed in a raid in Pakistan in 2011. Back in the 70s, South Korea's economy got a big boost from a rural development project called the Saemaeul Movement. Now President Moon Jae-in hopes to use the Saemaeul Movement for peace and prosperity in the international community. At an event gathering Saemaeul leaders in Suwon this afternoon, President Moon said Korea is sharing its experience with developing countries as a responsible middle power. He said Korea and ASEAN will discuss cooperation on the Saemaeul Movement during their special summit next month to help member states advance their economies. He also thanked the leaders, saying their commitment in times of crisis will never be forgotten, like when they led efforts to collect gold to overcome the 1997 financial crisis. Wall Street overnight saw the S&P 500 hit a record high. That was apparently due to optimism that the U.S. and China will reach a trade deal and that the Fed will cut rates this week, as our Hong Yu reports.
The S&P 500 hit a record high on Monday local time on increased optimism over a U.S.-China trade deal in anticipation of a rate cut by the Federal Reserve later this week. The benchmark S&P rose 0.56% to close up at 3,039.42, breaking the record high of 3,035.86 hit on July 26. One of the most notable blue-chip indices, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, closed less than 1% away from topping its record closing level with 27,090.21. And the Nasdaq Composite Technology Index rose 1.01% to 8,325.99. This comes after U.S. President Trump told reporters on Monday that a significant part of the trade deal with China could be signed ahead of schedule. Trump called this the Phase 1 agreement, stressing it is a very big portion of the China deal. Washington and Beijing held working-level trade talks in Washington earlier this month, following which President Trump said a practical agreement had been reached. Trump said the practical agreement would take care of the farmers and also take care of a lot of the banking needs. The leaders of the world's two largest economies are working to sign a trade deal on the sidelines of the APEC summit to be held in Chile next month. The U.S. Trade Representative announced on Monday that it is considering extending tariff suspensions on $34 billion of Chinese exports, set to expire on December 28th. The agency will take comments on that proposition during November before making its final decision. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the European Union has granted the UK yet another Brexit delay. The initial deadline was this Thursday, October 31st, but on certain conditions, it's now been moved to January 31st next year. Kim Da-mi reports.
Just 3 days before the UK was formally due to leave the EU, 27 EU countries agreed to accept London's request for a Brexit extension until the end of January 2020. European Council President Donald Tusk tweeted on Monday that the bloc would allow for a so-called flextension, meaning the UK could leave before the deadline if a deal was approved by British Parliament. Tusk added the decision will be formalized through a written procedure, indicating there will be no face-to-face meeting of EU leaders. If no EU country rejects the delay within 24 hours, that's by Tuesday afternoon local time, then the delay will be formally adopted. This comes as British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was required by law to request an extension after members of parliament failed to agree on a divorce deal. In a letter to Tusk, Johnson reluctantly accepted the delay, calling it an unwanted prolongation and noting he had no choice under British law. And British lawmakers on Monday also threw out Johnson's attempt for a general election on December 12 for a third time.
We cannot continue with this endless delay. And I don't know about you, Mr. Speaker, but I think the Leader of the Opposition has now run out of excuses.
Johnson is expected to make a fourth attempt for an election using a different rule and a new bill on Tuesday. Unlike Monday's failed attempt, a bill only needs a simple majority to pass. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
As we just heard on Wall Street overnight, the S&P hit a new all-time high for the first time in 3 months. Why is that, and what else do you see in the markets today?
Yes, as you said, S&P 500 hit the record high on Monday, while the NASDAQ also a little bit fell short of the the record highs, but nevertheless still on the top level. The reason for those, the high indices, are because of the U.S. and China are saying that the possible trade deal is soon to be made. And also the investors are looking into the Federal Reserve rate cuts that might happen later this week. Also, some of the numbers are coming out from the major IT sector, including the Microsoft. They are showing a very strong earnings, and that has resulted into sharp rise in the share prices. It is one of the largest market cap stock within NASDAQ as well as the U.S. equity market. And if you look at the overall indices, it's very much S&P is up about 0.56%, and also NASDAQ is close to 8,230 level. Now, Donald Trump have said that he expected to sign a significant part of the trade deal with China ahead of schedule, but did not elaborate on timing. And clearly, this is building optimism from last Friday till now, and continuously affecting the equity market to move up higher. With also interest rate moving up a little bit higher, people are saying and believing that the economic recession will not happen anytime soon. That is having a booster to also the overall equity market rising. And as an insurance, Fed cutting interest rate probably tomorrow night will affect positively in terms of the equity prices further in terms of the future.
Well, now here in Korea, the Kospi started out higher today, likely for some of the same reasons, but it closed a little lower. What's the story in the Korean markets?
Yes, as you said, Kospi started strong, and it actually broke through the 2,100 index level, but it closed down below that. Kospi was pretty much flat today. But Kosdaq was up quite strongly by about 0.8%. Clearly, there's a mixed signals. But in terms of the currency movement, we feel that the overall indices should go up even further in the future as the Korean won continues to appreciate. If you look at the Korean won, it has hit the 1165 territories, and the peak in August was 1223. So clearly, there's been about 4% appreciation of the Korean won versus U.S. dollars, and this is creating positive inflows of the foreign investment into Korea. The reason why today has been showing some correction is because as Chinese equity markets showed some taking a rest and it shows some corrections after a very strong run in the last 2 days. And people are still doubtful about the U.S.-China trade deal in terms of the full details. So we need to see the actual signing, and the detail needs to be made in order for the further rise of the overall global market as well as Korean equity market. But we think that the deal will be made, and the overall strong growth in IT sector and the fourth industrial revolution sector should continue in the future, which should result into Kospi hitting 2,200 before the year end.
And briefly, Mr. Yu, the Brexit extension, likely also an election in the UK in December or so. Has that had much of an effect on the market?
Well, I mean, it's just creating some volatilities, but we clearly do not have any answers yet. Boris Johnson has written to the EU, accepting a new Brexit extension until 31st January. But do the EU leaders believe this will be the last delay before the Brexit? Nobody knows. But everybody do know that it is better than no deal Brexit. So as long as no deal Brexit doesn't happen, and that Brexit happens sometime in the future, that should create some stabilities. But until actual signing, the volatility should continue.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now, in Korea, it's become easy to use an app to borrow a car for a few hours, but car-sharing services that include a driver have faced serious hurdles, mainly from the taxi industry, which sees them as competition. The executives of one such company have now been indicted for operating without a license. Kim Jae-hee reports.
As we move deeper into the fourth industrial revolution, share services are exploding in popularity around the world. In particular, car-sharing services have experienced rapid growth in recent years, with the market set to be worth $12 billion by 2024, according to a report by Global Market Insights. But while U.S. car-sharing companies Zipcar and Uber continue to flourish, South Korea's rental van-hailing service Tata has been taking fire from local taxi drivers who say the service Tata provides is illegal under South Korean law. And on Monday, Socar's chief executive Lee Jae-ung and the chief executive of Socar's rental car hailing service unit, Value Creators and Company, Park Jae-uk, were indicted on charges of illegally operating their businesses without the correct license.
According to Article 4, Paragraph 1 of the Passenger Transportation Service Act, anyone with a passenger transport business has to obtain a license from the Transport Minister. Article 34, Paragraph 3 also bans car rental business entities from using their commercial vehicles for paid passenger transport. These were the grounds for Monday's indictments.
Experts added that the court is expected to focus on whether Tata should be considered a type of rental car service, which is within legal boundaries in South Korea, or an illegal taxi service operating without a license. In a statement, Tata said the world is changing in response to consumer demand and technological advances. It also maintained it has not broken any laws, based on a law that states rented vans within 11 to 15 seats can be offered with drivers. Despite the indictments, Tata says it will continue to operate its full fleet of around 1,400 vehicles until further notice. The court's verdict is not expected for some time, and it could take as long as 3 to 4 years if the case goes all the way to the Supreme Court. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
The K-pop boy band BTS, now a global sensation, are performing tonight in Seoul in the final concert of their world tour. On that tour, they raked in more than $170 million in revenue. But in fact, its effect on the South Korean economy as a whole is significantly more than that. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Excited fans line up in front of the concert venue. BTS Army from all four corners of the world sing along in Korean as they steadily filter into the stadium to see their favorite idols in the flesh.
I like them because BTS is charismatic and charming, and their performance is amazing.
It makes life so cool that we see them live more tomorrow and after that. I truly couldn't be happier right now.
During their 6-month world tour, which ends on Tuesday, BTS performed in 7 countries, including the US, Brazil, the UK, and France, dazzling over 1 million fans along the way. The tour generated over $170 million for the band and their agency through ticket sales and concert-related merchandise sales. The group's economic effect for South Korea in general has also been calculated at an eye-watering $4.65 billion.
BTS' effect on production inducement is about 26 times the annual average sales of mid-sized Korean companies, and the value-adding effect is about 9 times that.
On top of that, 800,000 overseas fans visit South Korea each year to watch concerts or go to fan meetings, giving a welcome boost to the tourism industry.
방탄소년단은 덕분에 한국어를 공부하는 친구들이 진짜 많아요.
Watchers say if you add the increased interest in the Korean language and other cultural influences that cannot be put into monetary value, BTS's effect on their home country is even more pronounced. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And a recent BBC documentary has delivered a primer on how K-pop has become a hit around the world, looking at its unique fan culture and even delving into the darker side of Korea's music industry. Won Jung-hwan reports.
Since the age of rock and roll, Western melodies, lyrics, and rhythms have dominated the global music industry. But now there is a new challenger to the dominance of Western music, K-pop. The BBC documentary K-pop Idols Inside the Hit Factory tells the story of the recent K-pop phenomenon. The program goes behind the scenes to give a sense of how K-pop's global success was possible, shedding light on K-pop's unique aspects like its idol training system and fandom culture. James Ballardi, a host who personally visited the birthplace of K-pop, has highlighted the K-pop's intimate fan culture, where idols master social media and mobilize fans with ever greater efficiency, was one of the key reasons that helped K-pop go viral and gain fans on the other side of the world. But he also pointed out the dark side of the industry, such as the recent scandals which involved embezzlement, illicit relations with police, drug use, and sexual abuse. Despite those scandals, a recent survey by the Korea Tourism Organization on Monday showed that K-pop is having a positive impact on the local tourism sector. In a survey of over 12,000 people who identified themselves as K-pop fans, nearly 90% of the respondents said they would like to visit the country. The survey also showed that BTS was picked as the most popular group among K-pop fans, and YouTube was the most popular platform to learn about K-pop. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the number of Koreans traveling to Japan has fallen over the last 3 months amid the tensions between the two countries. Data by the Transport Ministry showed on Tuesday that the number of travelers from South Korea to Japan from July to September was down some 15% on year. That's mainly because of South Koreans boycotting Japan to protest against Tokyo's trade restrictions on Seoul. On the other hand, Korean travelers to other countries, including Vietnam, the Philippines, and Taiwan, have increased 13%. The total number of Korean travelers during the third quarter was up over 4% to some 31 million. that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.
'19 Overseas TV Audience Survey.